everyone, this is Kiru's show here, and as you guys have read, this is going to be part 1 of What If Deku Was Sunshine, and it is my Christmas special. Thank you, Tongue, for almost going, well, I almost swallowed my tongue trying to say that. Now, I just recorded part 1 to this, and I did not like it at all. I immediately just realized I put way too much confidence in the Deku at the start. Now, I'm going to be mimicking some things I took from part 1, or I got from part 1, and I'm going to be taking them and putting them into this part 1. Now, this is going to be What If Deku Had Sunshine, and let us begin. Also, one thing I need to clear up before anyone thinks I have a lot of free time today, because I do not. I probably will not be able to upload the next part of this until later today. Now, I immediately just post these after I record them, so that's why my uploads are so fast. Sometimes. Now, I have no set schedule, so if I find time to today, I will try and record. And Merry Christmas, everyone. Now, let us begin whenever Deku is born. Deku is going to be born with his quirk, so he has more power immediately. Now, Deku's quirk, whenever someone would try and diagnose Deku, they would notice that he's actually a bit more nourished than a regular child, or a regular baby. So they would actually see, or try and look at Deku, they would find that he has that joint in his leg, or he doesn't have it, so he has a quirk. They would immediately start testing Deku, and they would find that his quirk is actually called solar. That is what they call it, because he's essentially able to harness sunlight and moonlight. Now, what do I mean by moonlight? Moonlight is actually a phenomenon where light from the sun bounces off the moon, and it actually is refracted off the ocean. Now, there's actually another reason why the sky is blue, is because our ocean is 70% water, and our landmass is 30% earth, or 30% land, which basically means that the sky essentially mirrors the ocean. Now, Deku, he is born with his quirk. He learns immediately that his quirk might be useless, because all it really does is, all it really does is stockpile power that he can use to essentially stay awake longer or not need to eat for, which would immediately make him somewhat more like Escanor, with him being small. Now, Deku's dad and his parents would have expected a lot from Deku, because Deku's quirk is actually, Deku's dad's quirk is an enhancement, not fire breath, and Deku's mom's quirk is actually a fire quirk in this timeline. Deku's mom, she didn't really care because she still loved Deku, but she kind of thought Deku would have had a stronger quirk. But he's only a child, so they had higher expectations for him. Now, Deku's mom, she still loves Deku, like any other mother would, but Deku's dad, he would actually resent Deku, because he was a pro and he expected more from him. He wasn't a very good pro, but he still expected his son to have a powerful quirk. Now, essentially, Deku's dad thinks Deku's quirk is useless, so he would just resent Deku and actually start taking it out on him. He would insult him, he would put Deku down. Deku would have his shy personality from the fact that anytime he would open his mouth at home, Deku's dad would immediately scream at him and berate him, and sometimes even beat him. Now, during one of these beatings one day, Deku gets angry and he's had enough, as he would immediately grab his dad's wrist and actually break his entire arm. Now, as soon as Deku did this, he would have actually begun bulking up muscle. Now, as soon as he started bulking up muscle, he would have actually gone to around this size. I need to find clearer pictures. Now, as soon as he bulks up, he's essentially around his dad's height, if not around All Might's height, which is whenever Deku's mom would walk in and she would immediately see him, she would scream thinking that he's an intruder who just attacked her husband. As Deku would immediately put his hands up, Deku's mom would have fired. Well, she would have immediately just blasted Deku with fire. Actually, being unfazed by this, she would scream even louder as Mitsuki would walk. Well, she would hear it from next door. She would run in, and Deku would immediately just have to explain that this is Deku. Well, she would see that all the scars, so she would mistake Deku for an adult man. Now, this is whenever Deku, he would immediately just try and shrink down or do what he can, and this is whenever he would actually try and stockpile his power. So he just holds it in his body. Now, as soon as Deku would shrink down, he would somewhat be doing this, and he's still got some of his, he still has some articles of clothing on, but not a lot. Now, Deku's mom would immediately run over to him, asking him what that was, and he would say that he thinks he figured out how to use his quirk. As Deku's dad would groan, and she would see that Deku actually has bruises and he's actually bleeding. Which is whenever they would call the cops, and Kakashi would be taken to the hospital. I think that's his dad's name. Hang on. Hisashi. Hisashi is his name. That is why. Okay, my bad. You learn something new every day. I did not know how to pronounce his name, and my mind immediately went to Kakashi. I'm sorry for those of you who have cringed from that part of my videos. Now, Deku. Oh, that explains that comment better. Now, Deku, he would immediately go to a quirk doctor, and they would actually say that it seems we misdiagnosed your quirk. Your quirk isn't solar, you actually stockpile the sun's shine, which essentially makes your quirk a mix of your parents. Deku's mom would actually be somewhat excited, saying that she's really happy that Deku's quirk is actually something, or she's actually happy that Deku's quirk actually does essentially allows him to actually make a good hero. As Deku actually looks up to All Might, but after what happened, he actually has some form of resentment. Because he used to find All Might a comfort, but now that he's essentially told that he can be a hero, even though he somewhat doesn't want to now, he just thinks that if people don't really see him as a hero, then he'll just become the best damn hero he can to prove that, hey, I'm the best, but that doesn't mean I care. Now, he essentially does this because he wants to spite everyone who said that he can't be a hero, which would immediately begin to build his cocky personality. Now, let us cut to the first day of kindergarten, where everyone is showing off their quirks. Deku is not in his buff form because he's actually just holding the energy in his body without using it. So let's classify it as an emitter quirk and a transformation quirk. Now, Deku would immediately just say that he has the best quirk, as he's actually somewhat more cocky than Bakugo. And he is calm when he says this. So he would just have his arm crossed saying that he has the best quirk, no one else can compare. And this is when Bakugo would show off his quirk saying that, my quirk is explosions. From what I've heard, all your quirk does is you don't need to sleep sometimes, you don't need to eat. What does that do? How are you going to be a good pro hero? As Deku would immediately just begin buffing up in front of Bakugo, Bakugo's face would have gone from a smirk to surprise to horror as he just sees his stockpiling amount of muscle overhead of Deku. Now, this is essentially what Bakugo is seeing. As he's looking up at Deku, he's in fear and surprise, as Deku would immediately just buff down, putting his hand on Bakugo's shoulder saying, "It's okay, Bakugo, maybe one day you'll be stronger than me. But that day is the day I die." Now, that is just immediately throwing shade at Bakugo. Let us begin further. The teachers are talking and they're actually surprised, and one of them is actually somewhat frightened, as they would ask if that's all Deku's quirk can do. Deku would say no, he's actually learning quite a bit more about it. It's actually a mix of his dad's quirk and his mom's. Now, everyone is actually asking Deku about his dad, and Deku would just say that, oh, his dad, he used to beat me, so now he's in jail. Oh, I'm sorry, Doria. Don't worry, he's dead to me. Anyways, now then. This is whenever everyone would actually see Deku create a small, cruel sun. Now, as soon as he creates this, everyone's looking at it and he would immediately put it in his hand, crushing it as it would immediately just ignite fire in his hands. This is actually impressing everyone because he's actually using his quirk and he's actually barely buffing out. Now, what I mean by this is, it's essentially Escanor at Sunrise, where he... Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. I realized that the picture I was using, it actually had the full manga panel. Now, I have seen a YouTuber actually use, if not, he uses different comic books. He's a comic historian. He says that he has to edit things to where he has to edit out the actual panels so he doesn't get copyrighted. Now, I actually found this picture without panels. So Deku would actually buff up into somewhat of a taller form, where he's essentially around the size of a teenager, and he's actually using sunshine. He's essentially at the size of Kanen Deku, but with more muscle packed on. Now, Bakugo would have told Deku that his quirk is impressive, but his explosions will be stronger. Deku would have actually just laughed at him, saying that he doesn't think so, and Bakugo would immediately get mad and actually just throw a small explosion at Deku's chest, which the teachers would actually stop Bakugo from doing, but Deku would just laugh at him, saying that really tickled. As he would completely buff down, saying to Bakugo that he's going to be the strongest hero, he's going to be number one, and just prove everyone wrong. As Bakugo would actually start training harder to deal with Deku. Now he just does your standard push-ups, sit-ups, and plenty of juice exercises. Now, along with this is whenever Deku, he would actually do his own intense training. Now, Deku is actually able to somewhat tap into the power without using it. And what I mean by that is, whenever he's exercising, he's actually able to do it for extended periods of time, actually using his power. Because he essentially, anytime he feels fatigued, he can just start activating his quirk, and it would actually just replenish his stamina. But his quirk will have a physical limit at some point, which he may find out about one day. But today is not that day. Now, while at the gym, people are actually telling Deku that after he would work out for about 3 hours in one day, and some of the people who actually are finishing their workouts would see him, and they would see that he's actually starting out at smaller weights, but he's working his way up gradually. Now, this is whenever a pro who is actually there for training would state that it's good that a young boy like him is actually going to work, but he has to actually just calm down a bit. because he's gonna overtrain himself. Deku would just yell at the pro that he can't overtrain himself because he's been going for 3 hours straight and he does not feel tired. The pro would immediately look at Deku, asking him if he has a stamina quirk. Deku would say kinda, but not really. But he would immediately just walk away from the hero, actually just working out more. Now, this hero is actually All Might. He's actually, well, how should I put this? I just blatantly did it in one of my other or the one I tried to record, but All Might has actually been injured by All For One, but he's somewhat been able to be healed by Recover Girl and actually a pro with another quirk. So, he actually shrinks down and stuff like Escanor, but he does it faster than Escanor. What I mean by this is instead of Escanor building up the muscle and losing it throughout the entire day, All Might can immediately he can just hold on to the muscle. He has to actually essentially All Might, whenever he works out or he just does anything, All Might's buff form, instead of him losing it in an instant, he actually shrinks down after a minute of him turning off his power. So instead of half his respiratory system and internal organs, let's say at least his lungs are still damaged, and at least his liver was damaged, which he essentially had the parts of it that were damaged cut off, because for those of you who do not know this, the liver, you can cut it into 2 pieces, and both sides will regenerate. It's the only internal organ that can do that. So, All Might would actually have a functioning liver. Now, after that, All Might would have seen Deku actually just pack on more weights and actually work out more and more, as Deku would try and do a max rep with his full power, and he would immediately just buff up into his giant mode, which everyone would immediately see and be shocked by, as Deku would immediately just grab as much weight as possible. And let's say that this was like a very specialized gym, so Deku had at least access to 2,000 pounds of weight, as Deku would immediately just grab the weight and just start curling it and doing all that. Everyone's watching as this kid essentially turned into a giant. Now, Deku is actually just doing that, and he's actually learning more and more about nutrition, working out, and he actually over exercises. What I mean by he over exercises is he does exactly what Stain does, except he does it even more intensely and harder than Stain. Now then, Deku, he would go home for the day, and he would continue this type of training for the next, let's say he started it when he was 6, so he would continue it for the next 5 years, and after 5 years, he would have actually cranked it up a bit more, and start using his quirk, which I'm going to flip a bit of, or I believe I already did include this, but if I did not, because I had to cut the recording and actually look for the pictures again, and I essentially went on for 5 minutes talking about it with this panel before I realized it might be able to be copyrighted, so I changed it. Deku has figured out a way to actually use moonlight, which whenever he uses it, it essentially acts, he can turn it into fire or steam, but anytime he uses it as fire, it actually glows a light blue flame, which is actually like, it's not as hot. Now, Deku, what the moonlight essentially is, it's just light bouncing off the sun and bouncing off of the ocean surface, or light bouncing off of the ocean surface hitting the moon. It's one of those two. So Deku can actually use moonlight, but it's essentially weaker. Now, Deku, anytime he uses moonlight, he actually notices that it's not as strong, but it somewhat changes his personality a bit more from Esternor to a bit more of Esterosa or one of the Ten Commandments, with being a little more sadistic. Now, that kinda does not help Deku's personality because he's actually seen as a psychopath whenever he uses moonlight or just taps into his full power. Now, let us cut to the last day of middle school, where Deku is actually somewhat around Escanor's mid-buff form size. He's essentially got this body type exactly. Now, Escanor, he has actually just... Ow. Escanor, he's got this exact body type. So he's essentially around Ida's height with that much muscle. That's just his regular form. As soon as he starts buffing up, he actually gets around this size in the background picture. But he does not have the tattoo before anyone comments, which I probably said at the beginning of the video. But that was 30 minutes ago, so I forgot. Now, Deku would immediately just say he's going to be the #1 hero, as people would look at him, and a lot of people have not seen him use his quirk, but they see how strong he is, so they would say that that's fine, as Bakugo would immediately shout that he's going to be the #1 hero and he doesn't care what Midoriya does. He is going to beat him one day. Deku would just laugh at him saying, Bakugo, I've told you this once before. The day you beat me, or are stronger than me, is the day I die. Nothing will change that. Can you decide that? No, I decide that. As Bakugo would challenge Deku to a fight. Now, as soon as Deku would walk outside, he's telling Bakugo that, you know what, I'll give myself a handicap, as he would immediately just put his hands behind his back, actually holding them together, telling Bakugo that he won't actually throw a punch, which is whenever Bakugo would actually just get mad and actually rush toward Deku. As soon as he would rush Deku would actually just throw himself backwards, and he would immediately just throw his head forward, headbutting Bakugo into the ground, knocking him out instantly. As people have been watching, Deku essentially just used Sunshine, but since the fact was he uses Sunshine sparingly in this form, he essentially barely built up any body mass before actually destroying Bakugo in the fight. Now, he would immediately tell Bakugo that that was adequate, but he's gonna actually have a proper warm-up and go to the gym, as he would just walk away and immediately encounter the Sludge Villain in the tunnel. Now, whenever he encounters the Sludge Villain, this is whenever Deku, as soon as the Sludge Villain would attack him, Deku, instead of struggling to get out of the Sludge Villain, he would immediately just use his quirk, and the Sludge Villain would immediately try and get away from Deku, but Deku would just walk straight out of him, turning around, just throwing his hand toward the Sludge Villain, blanketing the area in fire. The Sludge Villain would be confused, saying that these pros are crazy nowadays, as All Might would arrive, encasing the villain in a black substance. Now, All Might has Black Whip. Crap, it's hard to remember what I cut from these and what I didn't. All Might has actually been able to use Black Whip. Now, my reason for this is, one of the previous successors that tried to fight All For One, they realized that they need to pass it on to someone. But instead of doing that, they went to confront All For One, and they actually got heavily injured during the battle. Now, they actually had to give it to a quirkless reporter, and as soon as they gave the quirk to this quirkless reporter, the reporter would have been told that he needs to give it to this hero, who will be at this place, and that they will actually... The recording cut. He would now realize that since he has a quirk, now he can actually be a proper pro hero. As he would start being a pro and he would pass on the quirk. Now, after he passes on the quirk, this is actually whenever One For All would have built up a bit more energy. So it would actually be around, whenever it gets to All Might, it would have actually been somewhat around where Deku had it. But Deku had a bigger leap than One For All, because All Might was injured. So let's say that All Might can actually use 90% of One For All, and that's whenever he's supposed to be at 70%. And his 100% of One For All is actually around 115 to 120% of One For All, which is where it's at in canon, well, based around canon. Come on, stop black screening. Okay. Now, after this is whenever All Might, he only has access to Black Whip, because it's essentially a quirk based on emotion, which All Might would have felt a lot of after his mentor passed, and he would have awakened it then. Now, he essentially was able to only manifest one of the previous quirks. As Deku would have been seeing All Might, he would immediately ask All Might if he can actually have a match, because he just fought someone at his school and he did not have a proper warm-up. So, taking down or fighting All Might would actually be a proper workout. All Might would have immediately looked at Midoriya, saying that he's not going to fight another pro, as Deku would buff down, saying he's not no pro, as he would begin cracking his neck and saying that he's actually going to be going to UA next year, and he is really excited for it. Because he is going to prove just how strong he is, and he will actually beat... I need to see what's going on with this. My recording keeps cutting. Now then, after this happens, this is whenever All Might would actually say that Deku actually has quite a fit body, and he actually has a request. Deku would say, do you want a sparring match? As All Might would actually say, yes, but they will do that later. As he would buff down, and he would immediately just put the ball in his pocket. Deku would immediately put his hands up, saying that he's not the real All Might, he's just an impersonator. As he would immediately create a cruel sun in his hand, actually getting ready to throw it at All Might. All Might would have immediately just put his hands up, saying that he is the real All Might, but just let him explain. As Deku would still see Black Whip coming out of All Might's arm. He would say, so, you're not an impersonator then. Who are you? Or are you All Might? As Deku would immediately realize that, well, All Might, he actually has the body he had in high school. So, he's not All Might. The way I said that, people should automatically know, I mean Small Might. Now, because of that, Deku would actually realize that, or he would have the explanation All Might's injury, what happened to him, and how it affected his body, which Deku would understand, and he would actually be offered One For All. Deku would have actually just threw his head back laughing at All Might, saying that he doesn't need it because he'll be stronger without his quirk. In fact, his quirk is totally useless to him, as what All Might saw wasn't even just scratching the surface of his power. In fact, if he has to give a good estimate, he probably only used... I would say, usually I don't have to use more than 10% against anyone, which All Might would actually find intriguing. Now then, Deku, he would immediately just tell All Might that that is true, so he's going to be off now. But he actually has someone in mind. There's a boy at my school. He's probably still knocked out by now, but his name is Katsuki Bakugo. Look for him. As All Might would just actually walk to Deku's school and actually find Bakugo actually walking out of the nurse's office with his head bandaged. as he would just tell Bakugo that they need to talk. And Bakugo would be offered one for all. Now, I'm going to be leaving this part off of here, guys, because I need to go shower and do some Christmas photos with my family. Now, I am going to be trying to record this when I can, but if I actually am very busy today, please do not expect an episode 2 today. But if there is, just know that I was able to find time. Now, goodbye, guys, and Merry Christmas.